So far, Craig and Thomas have talked about changing hydrologic regime along the Northeast corridor, and Craig talked about hydraulic model results. I'm going to try to bring those together to actually talk about the impact on aquatic habitat. So what I'm going to focus in on is the effect of large floods on the composition, the type of channel morphologies, how they're distributed, and what that means for aquatic habitat. So I'm going to roughly follow this outline in terms of looking at channel types, hydraulic effects, and then how those relate to grain size distributions or bed texture and aquatic habitat. So stream channels are composed of a suite of different channel types, right? Different channel morphologies. And they're juxtaposed according to physiographic effects, lithologic effects. And for the purposes of what we're doing, we're using the Montgomery-Buffington channel classification. And in that classification, there are 5 channel types: cascade, step pool, plain bed, pool ripple, and dune ripple. And they have distinct characteristics in three dimensions: their plan form, their profile, and their cross-section. And looking at the cartoons in profile, you can see they also have distinctions in terms of their bed texture or their grain size distribution. And as it turns out, salmonids have preferences for those bed textures, those different types of channels. There's actually there's channel types that they prefer versus other channel types. So Dave Montgomery found that the types of salmonids he was looking at in the Pacific Northwest, they actually prefer reaches that are response reaches. So those would be reaches that have, let me see if there's an animation here. Yes. Those are reaches that have higher sediment supply versus lower transport capacity. So in the Montgomery-Buffington channel classification, channels are classified by their transport capacity, so their ability to transport sediment versus their incoming sediment supply. So for channel types like cascade and step pool, they have a much higher ability to transport sediment. They have much less sediment supply. On the other side, response reaches, pool ripple, dune ripple, they have higher sediment supply, less transport capacity. So they tend to have more of the mobile gravels that salmonids like. They tend to have more upwelling of those gravels, hyperrheic flow that they like to spawn in. So there's a preference for channel types based on their bed texture. And that ends up being reflected in the sediment supply and the sediment transport. So again, channel types that they have preference for are dependent on the sediment supply, sediment transport characteristics of those channel types, and it also has a strong dependence on slope. So some channel types are more resilient to the effects of large floods than others. Those that are supply limited, the transport reaches, cascade and step pool, they tend to come through large floods without a lot of change in their morphology, without a lot of change in their bed texture. There's the channels that have smaller, more mobile grain sizes, plain bed, pool riffle, they tend to be more vulnerable to the effects of large floods. So what's showing in this table is the first column is the different channel types in the Montgomery-Buffington classification. And then across the top are the characteristics. And where you see a P or a plus, those are the characteristics that are most likely to change under a change in sediment supply, facilitated in what we're saying, in our case, by a large flood. So again, it's the response reach places. It's kind of a good news, bad news thing, because the salmonids want to be in those response reaches where things are more mobile and more fluid, but that's also where large floods have the greatest effect. So where are we going with this? Where we're going with this is we're going to talk about the 2022 Yellowstone flood, June flood, and how that may have changed the distribution of channel morphologies or channel types in some portions of Soda Butte Creek, and what that means for changes in grain size distribution or bed texture. That's probably a bed texture is probably a shorthand way of saying grain size distribution, and what that means for habitat. So I'm showing you this profile. This is a profile, elevation versus distance of the thaw weg of Soda Butte Creek in pre-flood, blue line, and post-flood, orange line conditions. We're gonna focus in on this Trout Lake Reach and what we're gonna look at. But you'll notice this great big convexity here in the profile. If you know anything about streams, you know the streams don't like that. They do not like to have big convexities in the profile unless you're in the Colorado River and Grand Canyon, where every one of those rapids is a convexity like that. So this is a material that the stream cannot move, right? And what that is that's a landslide deposit and hand gravel deposits, which are basically relic glacial deposits in this area. And what you can hopefully see even from the back is that post flood, all of this has been removed by erosion, and then post flood, it's all been deposited locally here. So there was quite a bit of channel change in this specific reach of Soda Butte Creek, and that's the part that we're actually going to look at today. So just to kind of, you haven't really seen a picture of Soda Butte Creek, so this is what it looks like. It is a gravel bedded stream, single threaded, loose cohesionless gravel in the banks. Bank strength tends to be not great because it is this loose cohesionless gravel. Sometimes it's a multi-thread in areas where sediment supply is the highest. You've already seen this picture, but what this doesn't tell you is that Soda Butte Creek heads out of Cook City, just outside of the park, down to its confluence with the Lamar River here. And all along this length, it's pinched by alluvial fans that come down all the way to the road and by landslide deposits. So all along that pathway from the northeast entrance, even above it, all the way down to its confluence with the Lamar River, it's constantly being pinched by landslide deposits, alluvial fans, glacial deposits. This area has a really rich history. This was the pathway of the northern Yellowstone outlet glacier that went all the way down to Paradise Valley, all the way down to Chico Hot Springs. If you want to hear about glacial geology of this area, I'm going to be giving a talk about it in West Yellowstone next month. So anyway, this is a very cool system. But the upshot of it is there's a lot of sediment here. Sediment from the fans that come down, the landslide deposits, the glacier. There's a lot of sediment here for the channel to work with. So as Jeff and Thomas both alluded to earlier, you know, we had a rain on snow event, and in the northern Rockies in Montana, most of our flood of record events have been rain on snow, the instant conversion of snow to rain. So when we get massive floods in Montana, it's almost always, all over the state, it's rain on snow. And when you do that, and then you build your road in the floodplain, this is what you get. So this is Soda Butte Creek. This is that Trout Lake Reach that I was showing you on the map. So I'm standing on the Trout Lake landslide. I'm looking upstream. This is also part of the Trout Lake landslide all the way across. So this was a post-glacial landslide that occurred and went all the way across Soda Butte Creek. So it's trying to cut through this landslide deposit for the last 10,000 years, and it will continue to do so. So this is a very rich reach because it's had so much channel change. So at the very top where I can't reach, the channel avulsed during the 2022 flood. It avulsed. So an avulsion is a sudden channel change where it suddenly just flips. It changes its position and goes to a completely different spot. It did that up here, here, and here. And then the year after the flood, this reach flipped again. So there's been a lot of channel change in this area. And what you see on the left is part, not all of the Trout Lake landslide. Those two ponds are actually dammed in the landslide deposit. They're actually, so when that landslide failed, it basically treated all this hummocky terrain, and there were some ponds created. This is Trout Lake, that's Buck Lake, and up there is Shrimp Lake. And again, more of this is also part of the Trout Lake landslide debris, as well as the glacial deposits that are already there. So this is the part that we're going to look at in more detail now. So just strictly from an aerial standpoint, when you look at it from comparing pre to post, in the pre-image, you see a lot of white in the river, right? So that indicates that there is basically that's rapids. That's very steep, confined channel. And then in the post-flood image, you can see that the channel is now more sinuous. It actually has a meander bend to it, and flow is from Thomas helpfully added the flow arrows from top to bottom. But you can see how it's basically flipped from here to here, and then again it flipped right just off the page as well. So basically, part of the response to this step increase in sediment was the channel's trying to adjust to this huge amount of load that's come in all at once. And it starts to lengthen its channel. It starts to work around those sediments that are deposited, increasing its sinuosity. So here's where I get to use Craig's model. I get to benefit from Craig's skill in modeling to get to compare what's going on here. So this is we're looking at images of the pre-flood shear stress and the post-flood shear stress. So shear stress is the best metric that we look at when we're looking at sediment transport. It basically, it's the proxy for the geomorphic work that's done in the channel. So geomorphic work is the work of moving sediment through the channel. That's what makes channel change, right? You have to move the sediment, and shear stress is the chief hydraulic parameter that we use to look at channel change, the work of doing channel change in the channel. So you can see that in pre-flood, much more of the channel had high shear stress values, and post-flood, shear stress values are much lower as the channel has increased its length, increased its sinuosity. It's added an overflow channel, a side channel that it didn't have before. So what does that mean? There's a sort of back of the envelope estimate that we can use to take that shear stress and directly calculate what the mobile grain size is. So now we can use that shear stress and calculate what size rock is mobile in the channel and compare that to what salmonids might use. So going from pre to post, we can see that the average size for the same area is not quite half as big as it was, but it's pretty close to 50% of it was. It's much finer. The bed texture is much finer than it was pre-flood. So basically we see a change in channel type from a single thread channel to a braided channel, and that's pretty expected. These streams are steep because they're confined by fans and landslides. They're steep. You increase the sediment supply, that's typical conversion. High sediment supply, high slope, you get a braided channel. It's the most efficient way to move sediment. So that's what we're seeing here is now a conversion from single thread to a multi-thread channel. So again, we have this pulse input of sediment. There's been changes to the organisms themselves, but that's not part of what we do to track those changes. The Park Service is tracking what fish or what that did to populations, what that did to invertebrates. But we know that those changes occurred, especially in this reach, because of these sudden channel changes back and forth in this area. And we can't underestimate as well the loss of riparian vegetation. Again, because the banks tend to be gravel, cohesionless, they're very vulnerable to erosion. So there was a large loss of riparian vegetation. So we're looking at those hydraulic parameters and then seeing what does that mean for habitat metrics. So these are metrics in four different metrics: depth, velocity, shear stress, and mobile grain size. These are ranges of values that are typical for a lot of different species of places where they like to be, velocities that they're willing to live with, grain sizes that they prefer. But looking at our specific resident species, so Yellowstone cutthroat is sort of the iconic species in Soda Butte Creek. People come from all over the world. They want to camp at Slough Creek because everybody loves to camp at Slough Creek. It's a beautiful place, and they fish for Yellowstone cutthroat trout. And this is what they prefer. This is where they want to be. These are the places they like to be, deep, deeper waters, not too high velocity. They like to have those nice mobile gravels. And what we've done is take those ranges and take the results of Craig's hydraulic modeling, figure out what places are there for them to live in that reach of Soda Butte Creek pre-flood versus post-flood. So pre-flood, it was a pretty inhospitable place. It was steep. It's very shooty in there. Again, it's running over a landslide deposit that that landslide deposit was put there by the landslide. The stream can't move that. So it's steep and it's confined. But now post-flood, there's been a change in the channel type. And now we have more areas that are friendlier in terms of depths. It's not all steep. It's not all fast. There's now peripheral areas where juveniles and fry can live and make a living and survive the floods. So it's now better habitat for them post-flood. And we see that again. I think this is the same graph, just different graphics. And again, same with the shear stress. We're basically looking at areas there's less erosion. There'll be more of the finer gravels that they like. Again, converting that into mobile grain size, there's more spawning gravels available in the periphery of the channel than there were pre-flood. So there's definitely been a change in the channel type, a change in the bed texture in this reach of Soda Butte as a result of the 2022 flood. So it's kind of a bigger story. There's already a high sediment supply in Soda Butte Creek just because of the physiographic and the glacial history involved. But when we had the large flood, a lot of sediment that had been in storage for a long time had not been able to be mobilized, was mobilized, brought down from those alluvial fans, brought down from tributaries, increased sediment load to the channel, changed our morphology, changed our bed texture, changed where the aquatic species, where the salmonids want to live. So it's kind of a disturbance ecology story. So once in a while you get these large flood disturbances, but they create new habitat, which is great, right? That's what we want to see. The problem is, as Thomas and Craig both talked about, the recurrence intervals of the floods are starting to change. That's the problem. This was a 500-year event. So in future climatic conditions, that magnitude flood is now a 100-year event. I asked our sub-consultant Respec, in a high emission scenario, what recurrence interval is that Soda Butte Creek 500-year event? He said it starts to approach a 50-year event, if you can imagine that, under a high emission scenario. And that means that the channel is trying to get equilibrium with this sediment supply that's being supplied to it. And it starts to, get back to a graded condition of just moving the sediment that it has with the slope that it has. And it can't, because it gets hit by the next big flood and then the next one. So there's no time to equilibrate, because you keep the disturbances change from pulse disturbances to press disturbances, where it's pressing all the time. So there's kind of it's a good news story in the short term. We have a lot of fresh habitat that's been created in places that were, sort of stagnant and inhospitable, but under non-stationary conditions, it may become too much and they may occur too often. That's all I've got.
You happy to take any questions for Karen?
So the picture you showed with the river and the road before and after, that's a common thing that we see all the time. Most of the time, when we go back to our plans, we find that the river used to be there, but we like the road being straight. So we push the river over and build the road there. Do you know if that's the case here?
Like I said, because it's there's so many fans and landslides, they built on the available floodplain of the river. So if the floodplain is this wide and the river's over here, they take the piece that the river's not in right now.
Thanks. Real quick question. I've seen that situation like that around the Department of Transportation standards. Was there any appetite for a park system and a fish ways to move roadway away, especially given the current interval estimations?
We're working on that now, Jason. We're designing the 50% package for the first 10 miles of the reroute of this road, but if you move over, here's the landslide, and the landslide is coming right at you. I mean, it's just, we're just constantly, it's horrible. There really shouldn't be a road here.
I've been
Have they rebuilt the road?
We're working on it. Oh, well, yeah, they did. Under the emergency repair, there was a lot of road work. There was a lot of road work done.
So the river to be over that far and creating habitat on the inside.
There is still fresh habitat on that side. We wanted a bridge, but they wanted it open like that. So they cut into the landslide a little bit, just enough to squeeze the road in. I mean, actually, it looks like in this new alignment, they're actually going to take the road over the top of the landslide. So we'll actually pull the road out on that particular piece.
being considered.
Yeah, being considered, yes.
So when they did the temporary road, then did they include any sort of erosion protection, or they just do a road back in there? Or?
Oh, I think you can guess what kind of erosion protection we have under emergency action. It's riprap. Starts with an R and ends with a P.
Then, to get the channel depth data, how did you obtain?
You want to talk about how you do the modeling?
Yeah,
Like, how did you survey? How do you remember those depths that you got?
for the LiDAR, right there.
Well, this is from the model, right? These are all modeled results. But Craig did the modeling. So it's
We have pre-flood and post-flood.
LiDAR terrain.
So same flow, looking at hydraulic, there's previously split.
The LiDAR doesn't go below water.
How do they collect the LiDAR?
So the LiDAR, you're right, it doesn't go below water, but it was flown in my memory of it is it was flown in the fall. It's pretty low water. It's not, you're not getting the fall wag, but you're getting most of the channel is dry.
So I think you were maybe that you like fish habitat have been formed from this. I'm just curious if that should be surveyed and conducted in the.
Yeah, I haven't asked the park yet to see what that's the close the whole loop, right? Is there actually evidence of life? We haven't heard from the park yet what they've seen. Right.
Well, I'll just take this time, this is field trip tomorrow, to the US 34, flood repair, and, then the same deal, we're emergency repair, just mine, the stream, or to repair the road, and there was the permanent repair that came back, and, we're going to something tomorrow, things like that.
All right, well, thanks everybody.
All right,
And,
you're next.
everybody get back to you.